Joining us from Canada, New Brunswick, Canada, a special guest, a new friend to the Viewpoint radio broadcast and Save America Ministries. We have a story to tell that links us in a most amazing way. Stephen Wilcox, it's good to have you on the program.
Thank you, Chuck. It's great to be here. Hello, America.
From Canada, that's good. I appreciate that. You know, I don't recall whether or not we've actually had a Canadian on this program. I think maybe we've had one or two, but it's so good, Stephen, to have you aboard. Just so that we can orient ourselves geographically, tell us where New Brunswick is in the scope of Canada.
Well, if you take a look at just above Maine and a little bit to the right, you will see New Brunswick. As a matter of fact, my family moved here in 1778 in order to keep wearing red uniforms, Chuck.
That takes us way back, doesn't it?
Yes, it does, yeah.
Well, Stephen, you've lived there a long time, you and all of your family. Give us your take on what's happening here with the rulings in Ontario and British Columbia now legalizing homosexual marriage.
Well, my heart is broken, Chuck. I myself and many others are weeping tears. Our national anthem says, "We stand on guard for Canada, oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee." And it feels like the great North is falling. It's been a tragic decline for about 40 years. About 40 years ago, many of the churches here began to agitate on marriage and divorce rules and started to allow members to engage in homosexuality. And a few years ago, priests and pastors ordained in a number of denominations, and the church has led the world here, Chuck. The salt lost the saltiness and the carcass rotted. Well,
now Canada has run a bit further down the track than America, morally and spiritually. The deterioration has been much more rapid, began a little sooner. It's almost like you guys are the front runners for America.
I am afraid so, Chuck. But if there's anybody listening to me that has any decision-making power, don't go to where we are.
You said
it's a hard place to be.
Stephen, you said that it began in the church, that really it wasn't the pagans that were at fault. It was those who professed the name of Christ that have actually been responsible for this moral and spiritual deterioration.
Let me repeat that, Chuck. Christ said that the church is the salt of the earth. That means that the world is a dead world. We know that. It's dead meat.
Mm-hmm.
And most people won't become Christians. Most people will end up in a godless eternity. The only thing that makes it palatable to God, the only thing that keeps it from going rotten is the salt. And if the salt loses its saltiness, you know, this earth is hanging in the sun, and it just rots, and that's exactly what happens. We lead the way, my friend. We lead the way.
Stephen, you are a businessman. Why is it that you have such a strong commitment, a strong bone to pick, so to speak, morally and spiritually in your nation? Why don't you leave that to the pastors?
Well, I would gladly leave it with the pastors if the pastors would look after it, but they don't. You know, when Jesus was coming into Jerusalem and the people were raising up and they were praising him, and the priests and the Pharisees said, "Master, make your people stop saying that." And he says, "Listen, if they're be quiet, the rocks will rise up."
Mm.
And that's exactly what's happening. Is the people that aren't prophets, or aren't trained prophets, or not trained pastors, they're rising up and they're standing up in the gap for where the leaders in the church won't.
And of course, one of those areas is in the area of marriage.
Yes.
Just thumbnail why, very quickly.
Why? Why am I doing what I'm doing?
Why marriage?
Why marriage? Because marriage, listen, marriage is the crown jewels of the church.
Mm.
It's the crown jewels. You don't have to steal the small denominators. Why not go right to the box with the $1,000 bills? That is what defines Christianity on a practical level, on a daily basis, is morality. And you ruin and you steal and you poison the morality of the church.
Mm.
And the church, what's left, is not even worth carrying out.
Back in the 60s, the late 60s, I remember those years right after my wife and I were married. The California legislature decided to inaugurate no-fault divorce. They felt that it would be fairer. They felt that it would take a lot of the animosity and the heat out of a very unpleasant circumstance. And so they inaugurated what is called no-fault divorce, and it wasn't long before all of the states of the Union adopted no-fault divorce as the norm for our time. Some say that no-fault divorce was responsible for the breakdown of the family in America and for the breakdown of marriage. I don't think so. I think that no-fault divorce and that law was almost an expression of the drift of the mind and heart of America up to that time. For if, indeed, the mind and heart of America, and of Californians certainly, had not been open to that, that law would never have stood. But it was inaugurated by men and women who were elected as representatives of the people. And then in other states of the Union, one by one, those legislators inaugurated no-fault divorce as representatives of we the people. We the people wanted it. It was the spirit of the age. And so we are reaping the devastating results of that from Canada to America. And joining us on from New Brunswick, Canada, is Stephen Wilcox, a businessman. Steve, what kind of business are you in?
I'm in the insurance business, Chuck.
And what kind of business does an insurance businessman have to do talking about marriage in our time?
Well, listen, insurance just pays the bills. That's all that it does, Chuck. My vocation, my calling, and my attention, and my efforts, and my soul and heart are in the ministry to people that are trying to preserve marriage and trying to preserve their marriages, Chuck.
And there's a reason for that. You yourself have gotten caught up to your eyebrows and beyond in this problem, haven't you?
Yes, I sure have, Chuck, and it's not something that I would wish to have happen. If God was going to call me into a work, I wish it would be something like Albert Schweitzer, so that generations from now people could talk about it. But that's not what happened to me. I am divorced, Chuck. My wife and I met in Bible college and fell in love. And as they say about Bible colleges, you go in singles and come out in pairs. And after 26 years of marriage, on a Sunday evening a number of years ago, we were coming home from a revival meeting on a Sunday night, and my wife informed me that she had an attachment to another man, and if she had to make a decision, she was going to leave, and that began the entire turnaround in my life, Chuck.
All right, and your wife was heavily involved in ministry at that time, was she not?
Yes, she was. She was the music minister in the church and in charge of the music program, and we were both families, generations in the same denomination, and we were soul winners. There's many people that have given their heart to Christ over the years, from Steve and Lori Lynn Wilcox, and it was a great shock to the church, shock to our friends, and certainly a shock to me. Virtually dismembered the testimony, didn't it? Oh, completely dismembered it. I mean, it was, I had people that we were instrumental in leading to Christ told us that how can our marriage stay together when godly people like you can't stay together? And you and I made connection through an interesting set of circumstances. Can you tell us how that happened? Well, what happened, Chuck, is that I have a ministry on the Internet called www.marriagedivorce.com, and sent it through an organization which I founded called Theological Foundations. And I researched into what the Bible actually says about marriage and divorce, and went back, found out what the first church fathers had to say, the early leaders that we follow in the footsteps of. And I felt that I had to take this message to the world, and somebody that I influenced out in California or somewhere out in the West Coast knew you and brought us together, Chuck. Well, it's interesting because that somebody that connected with you was a fellow that I had represented in a divorce case about 15 years ago when his wife, they were both heavily involved in the church, and his wife left, went frolicking off with somebody else. I believe she's now in her second marriage since then, if I'm not correct. And this brother has been desperately just broken-hearted over that, and has never remarried, believing that God did not favor remarriage after divorce.
And so this has been a banner thing for him, and he connected with you, told me about your website. In fact,